Friends, welcome back to the Autry Benton Show. Today we have one of the most requested guests on with us today, a local legend in Myrtle Beach, Dino Thompson. Dino, it is a true honor to have you here.
My pleasure. I enjoy your show. And I'm tickled that somebody's trying to preserve a little of the past.
Well, I want to start off by complimenting you first, if I may. I've been a fan of yours for a good while, observing you from a distance. We haven't known each other long, but I've been a fan of you longer than we've been a friend. Just going to your restaurant, certainly just being a Conway boy, coming to the beach and working and enjoying good dining and stuff, but certainly going to your restaurant. But the one thing I picked up from you very early on, just watching you from a distance, is you love people and you love good conversation. You be in the restaurant, you can sit down and you can pick up a conversation with just someone visiting Myrtle Beach or someone that's lived there all your life, and it's not fake for you, it's real, and you enjoy a good conversation. And I think that's something that's missing in our world today, is just the power and just the beauty of a conversation, and you're the best at it. And
well, I'm not sure about that, but thank you. I do love hearing about other people's lives, and there's a lot of ways to go around in this world. And we all think the way that we grew up is the normal way, but then you talk to a few people and you realize, no, there's a million ways to grow up, find a life, find a passion, fail, succeed. And I love hearing those stories. I remember at Dino's House of Pancakes one time, I knew a lot of history that a lot of people didn't know. And a person came in and he spoke perfect English, elegant gentleman. And he said, have you lived here long? And I said, yes, sir, I grew up here. Is that right? What year did you come? And I told him we came in 46. I was 5 months old. He says, really? And this was about 1974. I'd opened first pancake house in Myrtle Beach, and then I opened first one in North Myrtle Beach. Anyway, and I got his accent, and he said, I was here, and I left at the end of 45, and I knew about the prison camp here in Myrtle Beach. Not many people did. And I said, you left at the end of 45. Were you here visiting, sir? He said, you could call it that. I said, were you in the prison camp on 71st to 67th Avenue? He said, exactly. So he had... They had 650 prisoners there from where Flamingo Grill is, 5 blocks on the ocean. And then they had more prisoners at the Army Air Corps base. So I asked him, I got to know him, and I was fascinated at him telling me what a typical day was like. He said, I brought my wife here 4 years ago, that was in the 70s, to show her where I was in prison. It was beautiful, so I bought a condominium in North Myrtle Beach. I thought, well, you're one of the few human beings on earth that ever went back to where they were in prison. And I got to know him over the years, and I thought, there's a man that has done quite well for himself. He was an engineer, a really bright guy. So, how delicious is that to hear a story like that?
Didn't even know. You already taught me something.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And he told me, he said, it wasn't bad duty. He said they did a lot of work out of the state park. Some of them were craftsmen, master craftsmen, electricians, plumbers, engineers. Said they would take us out there and we would build cabins out at the state park, went to the air base and built barracks. He said they would pick us up where Broadway at the beach was nothing but a Trask produce farms. And that whole area was produce. We were shipping produce to New York.
Wow.
There. And he said they would pick 80, 90 of us. We'd go out and pick fresh vegetables, put them on the trucks, and then they would give us several boxes. We'd take them to the prison camp, and we'd fish for fish.
Wow.
We'd sit and play songs, play some soccer. He said they were very kind to us.
Wow. Wow, what a story.
Yeah.
What a story. Wow.
Anyway, but discovering those stories is what I enjoy.
But I think that's the beauty of you. You took the time to want to have a conversation and then ask a question that led to
a friendship.
A friendship.
Yeah,
That's
right.
beauty.
Yeah.
That's very. I think that's what makes you special. But so
Well,
thanks.
thanks.
So tell me about your mom and dad and coming to Myrtle Beach early on.
Well, I'll tell you where they came from. My dad was from Cyprus, and he lived through the Ottoman Empire, you know, the turn of the century, when the Ottomans controlled most of that world. They got their freedom in World War I. The British took it over as a protectorate. My mom was from an island of Samos, where Pythagoras grew up. And he came in 29, right before the Depression, and my mother came in 33. Both came through Ellis Island, and you were vetted, a doctor examined you, you were identified, and you just didn't walk in back then. If you had a cough, they quarantined you until your cough was over. Mm-hmm. You know, that was the times. My dad, when you're growing up, you don't think your dad's that interesting, but as I grew older, I realized he was one fascinating man. So was my mom. She came here when she was 16 years old by herself. Her father had a cousin here. He had 7 children, and as each graduated, he'd put them on a boat with a letter and some money and send them to his cousin to live in Cleveland. So she was the oldest. She came first, 16 by herself. And then one by one, all the children came, and then they came. And they lived in Cleveland for a while and ended up in New Jersey. And my father came through Ellis Island, lived in New York. They met in New York in 1940 and courted back then you courted a couple of 3 years. And but Dad left his village, a goat village, a couple hundred people, 2,000 to 3,000 goats. You were a herder or you made cheese. There was no work there. And there was a worldwide depression right after the war. Mm-hmm. And as soon as he graduated, he left to find work to send back to his family. He had 7 brothers and sisters. And he went to about 7 or 8 countries. He went to Greece. Everybody's poor and starving. He went to Romania. He went to Bulgaria. He went to Albania. While he was in a country, one of the Slavic countries, a train came through advertising high-paying factory work, and a lot of men were jumping on. He jumped on. They took him to the Battle of Verdun in France, where 950,000 people were killed, Germans, British, Americans. And the factory work was digging up carcasses, trying to bring the earth back. You know, there's nothing but dysentery trenches for hundreds of miles and unexploded bombs, barbed wire. And that was the factory work. He worked there for 5 or 6 months. Every now and then he said a thump would go off and someone's legs would blow off. They'd hit a mortar. But he made enough money to go to England, and he spoke 5 languages. So anyway, he went to England. He'd never walked on carpet, never been in a restaurant. You know, he grew up in a peasant village. Kind of like Delane grew up in Conway. I saw that show. He's a very good friend of mine. I love that show. And he said he met another Greek who was a fast-talking fellow. I met him 35 years later. What a character. And he said, I'm trying to find a job, sweeping, doing something. He says, you don't start from the bottom, you start from the top. He says, you speak French, the menus are in French, and you speak Italian. The maitre d's and all the great restaurants are Italian. So you tell them you're Italian, show them you can speak French. And he made him, back then he gave him some black pants he had with a stripe on it, and he gave him a front and a black jacket. A front is just a piece of cloth like this, and it looks like a tuxedo, but it's nothing but a flap.
Right.
And so he applied and he got a job at the Kit Kat Club, which is the swankiest place in London, and he had never walked in a restaurant. But that man made a resume for him. He'd worked here. And he spoke fluent French and Italian, told him he was Italian. And he got a job as a commie waiter, which is a busboy. And within hours, he had picked up a stem glass and broke it, and done a few other things in the maitre d'. You've never worked in a restaurant. He said, I've never walked on carpet. I don't know what I'm doing, but very hard worker. I'm a quick learner. I speak fluent French and Italian. And he said, I'm going to make a man of you.
Wow.
And he said, but you're Italian, because he liked to hire Italians.
Right.
And within 3 years, he became a waiter, and that takes 5-10 years in Europe to be a waiter. Head waiter takes 8-10 years. And he's single, has a great job. He went from being a peasant to having money in his pocket. And he traveled. He took 8 months off and went to Egypt. And since he spoke 5 languages, he read every history book. He devoured every history book came near him. He got a job as a guide at the pyramids.
Oh, wow.
I got pictures of him riding a camel with a straw hat and a linen suit.
Yeah.
And leading a group. And he said, I did this. He said, it's 110 degrees. Your camel's behind is very lumpy. I'm telling the same stories every day. He said, so I made it more interesting. I put some Greek pharaohs coming through. I had Alexander the Great coming through 200 years later.
Oh, boy.
He said, but I made it much more interesting. And he said one day, the head of the British Historical Society came through with a group of 30 or 40. And Dad says I was very good that day. And she turned me into the office and said I was the biggest liar in Egypt. And I got fired.
He was selling tickets there.
Yeah. And he went back to England.
Wow.
And he was doing so well. And I said, why did you come to America? And I remember he looked at me like I was stupid. And he said, son, it was not why. It was when. It was always when I was coming to America.
Oh, wow.
So in 29, he got on there were 3 ships, the Titanic, the Britannic, and the Olympic. And he got on the Olympic in steerage, which is the bottom of the ship. And he, I think it was 6.5 days. And this is when I discovered my old man was not corny. I was 14. I was on the fishing pier. We used to go there and pick up things that people threw away that were still moving.
Yeah.
And I remember I was asking him stupid questions when you're a teenager. What's the last thing you would eat, Dad? The last day. He said, I love everything. That's the way he answered everything, unequivocally. It used to aggravate me because, when you want answers.
Yeah.
Who's the most beautiful woman? Grace Kelly, Gina Lowell, Bridget, They're all beautiful, son. Why do you have to pick one? So I remember after about 30 minutes, I said, what was the greatest day of your life? Now, I'm the only child. My mom couldn't have any more children. They wanted a big family, but Dad said I messed things up. And I remember he looked at me, and then he looked across the ocean like he could see something, and he said, oh, I remember that day. And I knew he was going to say the day I had a son, but I thought I'll let him say it.
Yeah.
He said it was foggy. I was almost asleep, and people started screaming in different languages, like a stew of languages. He said, but I could understand many. He said Jews and Albanians and Turks. And they were all saying the lady,
Wow.
in different languages. He said, I wiped the porthole off, and I saw the Statue of Liberty. And he said, that was the greatest day of my life. I'll never have another day like that. And I remember staring at him. I was kind of dazzled by that statement. I was envious of him for the first time.
Wow.
I looked at him different for the rest of my life.
What was it about America? Was it the opportunity?
It was the dream, yeah. It was the opportunity to come and be whatever you could be and be free. you know, people were escaping all over the world because of religion,
Yeah.
because of people were being enslaved. It was just always the dream to go to America, because I thought, you were single, you were making good money, you had an apartment
Yeah.
in England. Why didn't you stay?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how did they get to Myrtle Beach? Tell me that story.
Well, they met in New York City. Dad was living in Astoria, which was a Greek part of New York. And they met at the Waldorf Astoria New Year's Eve florist ball. Big deal. Dad had a tuxedo on, Mom in her gown, but she had 7 brothers and sisters. He couldn't get near her. You know, back then,
Oh, wow.
you were a stranger. You didn't walk up to your sister and start talking to her.
Yeah.
So he had to fight for weeks to even get an appearance. And they courted for 2.5 years, and they got married. And the Nazis had, the Mussolini had sent the Prime Minister of Greece an ultimatum. Germany and Italy want to occupy your country. Let us in, and you'll live, or you don't, and it's war. You have 24 hours to answer. The Prime Minister answered immediately with a wire that said, "Ohi," no. That was his answer. Mm-hmm. So Mussolini came in with 55,000 troops and tanks and airplanes. But the Greeks didn't have that much, but they had fought the Turks for 400 years. Mm-hmm. Every now and then they'd have an uprising, they'd be killed, and young men would do it again. So they've been fighting for years trying to get their freedom. Mm. So they defeated Mussolini's army, and then the Nazis sent 85,000 paratroopers and the Luftwaffe and took over Greece. And Dad had been married 3 months, and he said, I gotta go. I gotta go to Greece. I gotta fight. So he joined the army, and I never knew this till I was about 30, but they sent him to Camp Carson, Colorado from New York to train in the mountains. And the whole battalion was Greek. And they were training him to drop into the mountains with the resistance. Greece had a 4-year resistance all through the war. And when they all graduated, they marched with the Greek and American flag at graduation. I have a picture of that. And they asked for volunteers because they knew it was going to be extremely high casualty. 90% of them were caught, captured, or killed. And then they asked who was married. And if you were married, they didn't take you. That probably saved his life. So he fought. He ended up fighting in Italy.
Wow.
But he didn't die in the mountains of Greece. So then he got out of the army and he went to the shipyards, worked there. They were dismantling the ships then. It was a good job for a while, and then they laid off 10, 12,000. No work. So they packed up everything into a 1940 LaSalle. I was in the back, and he said in a cardboard box. And they heard that Florida was a boomtown or something. So back then you had to get on 301, and when you got to Wilmington, it stopped. And you had to go over to Ocean Highway 17 for about 50 or 60 miles, right down the middle of Myrtle Beach. Now, it's October, so Myrtle Beach is pretty quiet. And they stopped at the Cozy Corner Cafe, this restaurant right here. It had been built in the late 30s. It's now 46. Another Greek fella is running it, Tom Haley. He changed his name too. 2 Greeks in there, there's no business. They're yapping. Tom was a fast talker. He had French cuffs, you know, he was a snappy dresser. I remember he wore brown and white shoes, you know. My dad wasn't quite that snappy. And Dad said, we're gonna go to Florida, find a life, find a business. And he said, I'll sell you the lease on this place, it's ready to go. And Dad had saved his money from England, and he said, all I have is $3,200, which was a pretty good amount. Money. And he said, well, that's the price.
That's the price.
And so Dad, he went for it. And back then you didn't need a lawyer, you just handshake.
Yeah.
And
What was your mother's thoughts at that point?
she was upset. She said, are we in Florida?
Oh, we in Florida.
Says, no, you're in sunny Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Yeah.
She said, there's nothing here, and there wasn't. You know, there were 4 sit-down restaurants. There was an amusement park that came during the summer, but it was transient, and it left. It was like a fair.
Yeah.
It used to come, and then finally, Mr. Bryan bought the fair and hired Mr. Houston to run it. But anyway, Mom was really upset, and she didn't know where, and Dad didn't know where it was.
Yeah.
But here was a restaurant, here was a business. So along with that lease, apartment 1 right there, that's where I lived till I was about 14 and a half. That was my room, Mom and Dad's room. Now, if you look out that window, you're looking at the amusement park, the pavilion, and the ocean. Right beside us is the dime store, the movie theater, the drugstore, Divine Sporting Goods, Chapin's, and Paradise.
Everything you need.
Everything you need in life is right there. And
How old were you, Mr. Dino, at this?
I was 5 months old.
5 months? Okay.
Yeah, so I grew up there. And they worked 16 hours a day. Every restaurant then was not specialties. It was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You opened at 6, you closed at 11 or 12. It was only a 3-month season. When you leased a building like that, you were required to stay open. Now, if you could have closed, but so you had to save enough money in those 3 months to survive the winter. When I say survive, I'm not exaggerating. Little motel owners, all those iconic mom and pops on the highway, you had to borrow money every winter. And I had to do that. I opened Dino's House of Pancakes in 1970. I had to borrow money every winter for 4 or 5 years. When I opened Cagney's in 76, I still had to do it for about 3 years. And then I saved my money. I said, I'm never borrowing money again.
Yeah. Did he have some business with some locals during the off season at all?
Well, you had locals, but when we arrived here, it was 1,050 people. By
1,050 people. Those are residents.
Yes.
Say that one more time.
1,050 people when he stopped here and bought that restaurant. By 1950, there was about 4,000. So during the winter, the waitresses are walking around. There's 12 kibitzers sitting around the table. There's a cloud of smoke hovering over that table, and I'm 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I'm running back and forth getting things for people. You know, I'd go get what they call a meze in Greek, which is radishes and cheese, and you know, and Dad had a bottle of VO hidden, legal VO hidden behind. One of them would say 2 fingers VO, and there'd be a couple Lebanese, a couple Greeks, a Jew, 2 Baptists, and Charlie Fitzgerald, a black guy in the 40s and 50s. I've told that story before. People say, a black was in your restaurant. Yeah. He was a good friend of Dad's, and he ate in the restaurant, and he owned a nightclub in what we called Color Town. It was called The Hill because it had a little elevation. And Charlie was a gentleman that just didn't allow himself to be discriminated against, carried himself in a way. He also carried a .32 pearl handle pistol all the time, also a sport coat. And at night, he had different ties and looked like Cab Calloway. During the day, he'd always have his shirt buttoned in a sport coat. Very neat guy. He was quiet, but he and Dad kind of hit it off because he started eating with my dad. And are you familiar with the Green Book?
I am not. Before you go there, you know, you're going down, there's a line in your book, and I'm probably going to mess it up. You correct me.
No.
But you said that while civil rights was trying to get started and while black men were trying to get the right to sit in a diner and eat. And I think your line in your book was, but that was never the case in the Cozy Corner. They were
No, it
always
wasn't.
welcome. Am I hitting it right?
Yes.
Yes.
And the Green Book was the Black Traveler's Guide that every family used to travel through the United States. Victor Green was a postman from Maryland. He decided to do it in the Washington and Maryland area to show you where you can get a haircut, where your wife could get a coif, where you could sleep, where you were welcome to eat, and the towns that you were not welcome to stop in. They were called sundown towns. It's rude, but
Yeah.
sometime there was a sign there that said,
Yeah.
after sundown, you need to leave. And if I tell you this, you may not believe it, but you can Google this. There were more sundown towns in the north than there were in the south. There are more sundown towns in Indiana and Pennsylvania and New York and Illinois than there were in South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, which is hard to believe, but that's true.
True, yeah.
So racism was not,
Confined to the
we
South.
didn't invent it.
Yeah.
No. But he created that Green Book, and it encompassed every state in the United States. So Charlie was in it in the 30s and 40s. He had a little ad, Charlie's Place. Sometime he called his motel Whispering Pines because Billie Holiday sang there in the 30s, and they said you could hear her voice whispering through the pines after she left. And people started calling his club Whispering
Wow.
Pines. So since he advertised there, people that traveled said, we got to go here. That's the next safe stop. They'd stay at Charlie's Place. He had a 22-unit motel.
So he had a hotel. He had places you could stay.
He had
Charlie.
22 units. He had a very nice nightclub, not a juke joint.
Yeah, but it was called Charlie's Place.
Yes. And he had a restaurant, and he had 4 cabs. Now, white or black, he was a substantial businessman.
I would say he's
Yes, he was.
substantial.
And he would sit in the Broadway theater in the white section. I would sneak in the black section. He's sitting in the white section. I like to sit up there because they like to talk.
Yeah.
And nobody threw anybody out up there. They threw us out downstairs.
Yeah.
But I got to know him because he was in the restaurant, and Dad would take his staff home. He had a Army Jeep, Willys Jeep, and we piled it. Most didn't have cars then, so piled in, and I'm always piled in. We go to Charlie's Club, and Dad would sit and have a VO, and they would chat, and they became good friends. And I would
How
go
old
play.
were you at this point?
I'm
Roughly.
every night.
Yeah.
I'm with Dad till they close, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
I got you.
And I was hanging around with him all the time.
And from your conversations, your dad didn't know a stranger. He didn't know color. He didn't know any barriers. Is that right to say?
That's perfect. Yeah. He was, as I grew older, I realized he was beloved because he didn't say, he took, this was a lesson. He didn't tell me, I just watched him. He took joy in other people's success.
Wow.
I never saw him say or look like, Autry's, he's got this, he's got that, you know, he's lucky. I wish I never heard him say anything remotely close to that. And as I thought about it, the more older I got, I realized that was a real blessing for him and for the people around him. You know, if somebody came in and said they had done this or
Yeah.
business was good,
Yeah.
you know, I could tell he appreciated and enjoyed your success.
Yes, that's a lesson that many could learn from. At this point, do you think your dad was enjoying Myrtle Beach? Did he, he'd been here a while at this point, did he know this is a place that he had drew his stake down, this is where he was going to be, or was he still trying to figure it out?
No, he had a good day every day.
Good.
We had catastrophes, and he weathered them. Amazing. The restaurant burnt down.
Was that before Hazel or after Hazel?
That was before Hazel. I was 7, and I was in the I used to work in the kitchen when I was 7. I could operate that. When I was 8, I could run a band. a band machine cut chickens without cutting my fingers off. You know, there was no OSHA back then. So I learned to do everything. And I was a hard little worker, and Dad knew how to make me feel good about when I swept, he said. And he said, perfect, you know, so it made you want to work. And I remember somebody was carrying a pot of spaghetti full of water, and they tripped and it fell in the deep fat fryer and exploded.
Oh boy.
And when you got 350 degrees, all of a sudden fire's everywhere. I immediately streaked out the back, and the fire station's only 2 blocks away. And the police station, they were together back then. They were on 9th Avenue. And I ran in there, and there's 3 firemen, 1 truck, and I was screaming, there's a fire at the Cozy Corner, and they weren't paying any attention. And then I described how it happened. One of them said, better go. So I rode the fire truck, the front of it. I was hanging on to the emblem. I wanted everybody to see me coming on the fire truck.
Going to the Cozy Corner.
Yeah. And it's 2 blocks away. Of course, my mother, the last time anybody saw me was in the kitchen, and now the kitchen is engulfed in black, greasy smoke. And my father is crawling around with wet tablecloths on top of him, feeling for me in there. And I remember when my mother's screaming and talking to God the whole time, you know, about her son. But I wouldn't get off the fire truck. I wanted them to turn around and see me on the fire truck, you know. Da, 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 da. And the chief was Fernie Falk, smoking a cigar. He went to every fire with a lit cigar. And my dad crawls out of there, and he's hawking, coughing, gagging, and he said, my son's in there, my son's in there. And chief said, Tony, your boy's riding that thing like a trigger up there. And my dad looks up and says, you're supposed to be in there dead.
Yeah.
I said, no, I went and got the fire truck. My mom's crying and laughing and
hugging you, kind of spanking you.
Yeah. I'm safe.
Oh.
So anyway, I remember Dad handled that like Mom cried for days and days.
Yeah.
We had no insurance. Everybody went bareback back those days.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'd watch him. I'm thinking, why isn't he traumatized? But he had this Zen Greek philosophy thing about him all his life, and he could do without. He used to tell me stories when I screw up and do something wrong. Instead of telling me I was stupid, he'd tell me some Greek mythology story about Epicurus or about Diogenes that didn't own anything, and all he had was a ladle. He slept in the streets to drink water, and one day he saw a child cup his hand and drink water, and he says, I don't need that, and he smashed the ladle. He had nothing. And he used to tell me that when I needed something.
Yeah.
He said,
That's a good story for that. You know, he certainly, so I guess he came back from the fire, you know, built the restaurant.
They did. They real built it. And
Then Hazel
Mom was a hard worker. She worked 18 hours a day with my dad.
Yeah.
You know, they worked together. And I was in the restaurant. And my dad tried to lease other restaurants, but he always leased something. And it was like I said, you had to stay open. You made money 3 months. And then in a couple of years, you lost it.
Yeah.
Because you're losing money for 9 months. And you actually did lose money 9 months in the 40s and 50s. In the 60s, you lost money 7 months. You know, it was starting to pick up. So he went from the Cozy Corner to the Fun Fair Grill, to the Caruso's Spaghetti House, to the Diplomat Cafe, to the J Tree Tea House, to the Imperial Lobster House, to the Black Angus Steakhouse. And then I went to college. I didn't want to go to college. I didn't think I needed to because I knew the business.
Yeah.
But there were immigrants.
Yeah.
They wanted me to go, so I went.
Can I ask you about one more story in the book that fascinated me? You know, coming along later in life, I've always heard about Hurricane Hazel, how bad it was. One of the probably terrible hurricanes we had here early on. But you have vivid memories of Hurricane Hazel. You're one of the few people that I know that can give me an account of that. Tell me about that experience.
Well, we're staying at the Cozy Corner. We live on top. At about 3:15 in the morning, you start seeing people driving down the streets with bullhorns. Civil Air Patrol, Boy Scout troops, the Army Air Corps base, half-tracks with the few police, and we didn't have a lot. It's 54. It's October. It's late. It's 3:15, and now we find out there's a hurricane coming. We knew that something was out there, but they had said it had turned days before. And the hurricane tracker airplane was so buffeted the third time it went up that several of the people were hospitalized on the plane. So it didn't go up for a couple more days. So they kind of lost the exact route. I was told by the chief of police of North Myrtle Beach, he was a ham radio operator, Merlin Bellamy, that someone was trying to contact him ship to shore. And since he was a ham radio operator, he finally said, "I'm Captain so-and-so, I'm 260 miles out. I've been tracking this storm for 36 hours, it hadn't moved." You're tracking it. He said, "It's heading right at you."
Wow.
And he said, "I have no idea how fast it is, but it blew I forget what you call it, aeronometer off." So he calls Myrtle Beach chief, and they remove everyone for the first 2 or 3 rows. And back then, they didn't ask you, they moved you if you wanted to say, "No, I'm not leaving." They made you leave. So they saved a lot of lives. North Myrtle Beach lost about, for instance, it was 5 beaches. Ocean Drive had 410 houses. 2 were left. Crescent Beach had about 380. 1 or 2 left. I mean, it wiped all the first 2 or 3 rows out. I think North Carolina had no idea it was coming. They lost about 15,000 homes and all those little beaches sitting there. I think 23 people were killed in North Carolina. It killed 20-something in Maryland and 15 or so in Virginia. They had 120-mile-an-hour winds in Charlotte and Raleigh. They had 115-mile-an-hour winds in Philadelphia. It killed 17 people there. 115-mile-an-hour winds in New York City.
That was a terrible storm.
20-some people there. And then it went up Toronto, and it killed 100 and some people. It hit at high tide, and it hit at what we hunters call a hunter moon high tide, the highest tide of the year. So the good side, it came in about Windy Hill. The good side's 14 feet surge. Look at the ocean, put 14 feet on it. The bad side was 18. So it was a monster storm.
You wrote it out in the Cozy Corner, is that correct?
We wrote it out. We were sitting here, and of course we taped all the windows up. We thought tape was...
Were you nervous, Dino? Did you know what was going on?
I'm young, and you're just excited, and you're scared, But Mom, they had cooked a huge meal, and so everybody from that block that had business came down because we had all that food. And I remember I'm sitting there, and I'm watching things blowing by, and the ocean came up. There's 30 feet high right here. Ocean came up to the doors and started running into the basement. We had a basement. But I saw things flying by, and then I remember I heard a ping, and I remember ping, ping, and I looked out, and a galvanized garbage can went right through one of these picture windows.
Oh boy.
And hit the back wall like a bullet.
Busted the window.
Yeah, and it smashed the back. I mean, it was traveling 100 miles an hour, I don't know. And I remember my dad sitting there smoking, and he goes, "Maybe we'll move downstairs in the basement." So everybody went down.
What was your mom doing?
She was praying.
Praying.
She always had her Bible, and she was praying out loud.
Yeah.
And so we all went down, and my grandmother was there. They were both praying. They had a sermon going on for the next many hours. And right in the middle of it, Mom wouldn't let Dad smoke. And he said, put your jacket on. And even at 9 years old, I thought that was stupid because I'd just seen a garbage can blow through the window. I said, where are we going? He said, we're going outside, check on things. He had an Army Jeep.
Yeah.
It's in the side of the alley. If you look down that alley, the railroad depot is right down there. And he ties me to the seat. There's no top on it. He ties me with clothesline. My hands were even tied. And we were driving, the Jeep had a exhaust that stuck up, so we're going through 3.5, 4 feet of water sometimes.
Yeah.
And we made it to the boulevard, to the Royal Laundry. There was a laundry right there near the Ocean Plaza Pier and Hotel. He said, we're going to watch the pier go away. So we parked, and I remember we weren't there 5 minutes, and a huge wave just crashes on us. We're on the other side of the boulevard.
Yeah.
And Dad said, maybe we need to back up. We backed up a couple 100 yards, and we waited there, and that was like watching the movie where Moses parted the seas. I mean, you can't describe how powerful and ugly, nature can be.
And you witnessed that, Darren.
And we're sitting there watching, and I remember there was a restaurant on top, and me and Dad knew the guy that owned it. It was called the Casino Restaurant. And it broke in half first, the middle of the pier. And I remember it's floated on a 20-foot wave, for 15 minutes. Then it fell into a trough, and you could hear it cracking like you're cracking ice, breaking apart. Mm-hmm. And within 15 minutes, that huge restaurant was gone. And then the end of the pier fell, and Dad cranks the Jeep up. And he says, all right, we'll go back. And somehow we got back through the water. We're on two wheels.
Were you nervous?
Yeah, of course I was scared. And I remember we got back to the alley, unties me, and of course we're soaked. He said, don't tell your mother, she worries. Where have you been? We went to check things.
Oh boy, in the middle of a hurricane.
In the middle of a hurricane. But nobody told you it was going to be a 4 or 5. It's just a storm.
Yeah. Wow.
We didn't have Ed Piotrowski then.
I tell you what, there's not many people that could live through what you did to see that. That's quite an experience. How long did it take for Myrtle Beach to get back on its feet after that?
A couple of years, but you have to understand everybody was mom and pop. And they took care of their places. And everybody that owned a motel, a little guest house, they worked on them themselves.
Okay.
Sometimes the father was a farmer, and his wife ran the place. Mm-hmm. A lot of the great boarding houses were run by ladies. Mm-hmm. And if you grew up on a farm, you were handy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they would come over and they'd put their places back together. And within a year and a half, Myrtle Beach was a resort again. And, we were driving distance from Charlotte, and people from West Virginia and Charlotte are going to come.
And you've said it many times on the show already, but Myrtle Beach just was a different time. I mean, you said it, but the tourist season was about 3 months, and then
it slowly lengthened.
Yeah, but not like it is today. I mean, it's just changed, but it was just different times back then, right? And then you had across the waterway in Conway, a very rural part of the county.
Absolutely.
You want to speak to those two?
Well, I've got a chapter in my book about the Conway game.
I love that one.
We played Conway for years, and they called them one of our rivals. They kept beating us. I remember I told the coach, we beat Loris, we beat Lake City, we beat Mullins, we beat Georgetown. Can't we have them as our main rival?
Yeah.
Because Mr. Sasser was a coach back then.
Yeah.
And when I played against a great Conway team. Buddy Gore, Jeff Branton, Joey Branton, Jeff Stevens, I think was the name. Steve Chris was a quarterback. He became a banker. Anyway, they had a good team and a great coach.
Yeah.
And so I try to contrast the two cities quite humorously.
You did very well.
Humorously,
very well. The way you say things, different lingos.
Right. It was another world. It's another world. Our language was different. But I loved You know, I had so many friends in Conway. And when I opened Dino's House of Pancakes, the hardest working gals I had were Conway girls because they could wake up at 5 o'clock. Some of the Myrtle Beach girls were late.
Yeah, yeah. But you and we talked about the book. We're going to encourage our listeners to watch it. But that was a beautiful chapter. Just the difference of the two worlds, you know.
Yeah.
But Myrtle Beach was just a different time, you know. I mean,
well, you know what? People poo-poo and scoff the last two generations when we say it was a wonderful time, and they always bring out what was bad about there's always evil. But I walked everywhere. When I was 6 or 7, I walked in the pavilion by myself. I had a few nickels and play something and come back. I mean, we walked to school. Nobody disappeared. Mm-hmm. There were no monsters out there. There were no drugs. Mm-hmm. Getting in trouble was a cigarette or a Pabst Blue Ribbon. Mm-hmm. Running away from a policeman, which I did a few times. But that era, there'll never be another simpler, safer era than right after the war to about the mid-60s. We'll never see that happen again.
Yeah.
Now there are real terrors out there, things to worry about.
Yeah. You know, you talk a lot about the cozy corner, early part of your life, and you being such a people's person. You've already hit some, Charlie. And your book talks a lot about, tell me about a few more characters that you learned from early in your life that you drew from, if you don't mind.
Well, I always attribute most of my fascinating education of sitting around that table of kibitzers, listening to their stories. And these are men that had seen 2 wars, been in 2 wars, seen 2 depressions, seen the horrors that the world had to offer, you know, during the Ottoman Empire, during the Nazis, the communists. And they were wise, and they knew history. They spoke several languages. They would listen to you. They enjoyed your history. And they were just nothing but characters back then. Mm-hmm. And I remember in my book, somebody asked me that one time, says, you make some of these people sound so interesting. Were they that interesting? And I said, I think they were. And I went home and I thought about it, and I thought, yeah, why? I said, because these men had seen so much, done so much. They were not interested at all in how you perceived them. We're so concerned about how we appear to each other, mm-hmm. trying to impress each other, mm-hmm. you know, out bling each other, out own each other. They didn't care. They said what they wanted. Talk about not politically correct. Mm-hmm. Every conversation was not politically correct. Mm-hmm. They did what they wanted, ate what they wanted, wore what they wanted. They really didn't give a hoot how you looked at them or felt about them, because they were good men. They knew they were doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. So they didn't need to be judged.
Yeah, and they had
that made them interesting.
And they really lived some real life, yes. If that's the right way to put it.
I remember there was one incident. There was a fellow named Cadillac Joe. He looked like Cesar Romero, a really handsome guy, and had that silver gray hair and a little mustache. And he drove a baby blue Cadillac, and he was a professional gambler and a chef, and he traveled the world doing both of those things. But he would come and spend the summers and work with my dad during the summer as a chef. And I remember I knew several people that had lost their entire families to the Turks. My partner, Dino Thompson, his mom and dad and entire family were killed. Around the First World War, the Turks went on a rampage and just started killing everybody that wasn't infidels, that was an infidel, which is non-Muslim. And so the men lined up, put the women and children behind them, and tried to fight to the sea to save hundreds of thousands. And boats came from Greece picking them up, big boats, little boats. And I remember he told me Cadillac Joe had lost 20 some of his family, and he had been through 2 wars, and And I remember I would ask him about this, but he would never speak of it. He said, those are things you never speak of. And I remember there was a little Klan incident where the Klan gathered about 8, 10 of them in Conway.
What year is this around, roughly?
This is about 58,
Okay.
7. The terrible Klan incident of Charlie Fitzgerald was 1950.
Okay.
I write about that, and it's been, well, there's documentaries about it. But I remember Joe, a guy, he was a cab driver right there. Cozy Corners here, the alleys there. Cab, buildings that big, somebody sits there, dispatcher. And his name was Skinny Swoops. He was about that big around. And he'd come in and get 2 egg sandwiches to go, and I could take cash. And I remember Cadillac Joe said, Skinny, you boys, it was a picture in the paper in there of them running because somebody set the field on fire. He was spewing vile from the back of a pickup truck, which is what they did. And there was some Barcola Lespedeza or something dry, and they had to run. And it shows 3 or 4 Klansmen running because the field's on fire. And they all thought that was hilarious. He said, you boys almost got your sheets caught on fire. He said, you know, and he said something a little more derogatory.
Yeah.
And Skinny, I remember he stopped and he leaned over the counter and he said, you need to watch what you say about the Klan. You can get hurt up talking like that. And Joe was one of the most gregarious, easygoing men you'll ever see. And I remember he stood up and walked over and he grabbed him by the shirt and he pulled him close and he said, I fought the Bulgarians with knives and rocks. And then I fought the Nazis with hand grenades and bombs. And then I fought the communists. And then I fought the Turks with my hands. He said, I'm easy to find. And he let him go.
Wow, what a story.
And I remember I looked at Dad and I said, he did all that? He said, he did all that.
Yeah.
So these are the men I grew up with, and I
Yeah.
thought they didn't care what you thought about them. They lived their lives. A delicious youth that I had. I appreciated those people. And I worked with some of the greatest people on earth, the waitresses and cooks. Wild Bill Logan, he worked for my dad when I was 5 months old. He was working there the day he bought the restaurant. 23 years later, he's working for me at Dino's House of Pancakes.
Isn't that beautiful?
And, you know, just one of the greatest men I ever knew. I have 5 people that worked for me 45 years, from Cagney's to Flamingo Grill. 4 of them are still at Flamingo Grill. I have a bartender, been there 41 years, and a manager 39 years. And you know, I just grew up, these are hard-working, decent people, waitresses, cooks, even dishwashers. And I'd go out to Charlie's place as a young white boy to see Amos Milburn and Big Joe Turner, Ruth Brown, Charles Brown, Little Richard. I saw Little Richard when I was 10.
Yeah. Were you welcome there? I mean, did you
Very
feel
welcome,
there?
because
Yeah.
Charlie was a good friend of my dad. And he died, but his wife ran it for another about 14 years, and a very beautiful mulatto lady. We called her Miss Sarah. And she always looked out for me. I'd take a few of my friends, and everybody was gracious. And the only thing she would tell me, she knew I grew up on the boulevard. And you grow up on the boulevard, you get in an argument, you fight. Back then, that's how you solved it.
Right.
You didn't shoot anybody, you didn't stab anybody.
It was fists.
Took your shirt off, you hit the beach, you got a bloody nose, fat lip, and you were friends afterward because you respected the guy whether you won or lost. And she told me, I know you're feisty, but you can never have any trouble in here.
Yeah.
Never. And I said, yes, ma'am. Never
Wow.
have any trouble in here. So if somebody was drinking too much and got in my face, they would watch and they would just pick him up by the armpits.
Yeah.
Big Robert, 6'4", 280. and he'd take him out. That didn't happen much.
Yeah, yeah.
But they looked after me.
Yeah. Well, Dino, our time is gone. So one thing has already come to my mind is you're going to come back, I hope, really soon. And we're going to pick the story up, and we're going to maybe do a series through the year.
We'll do that.
You know, and because I want our listeners to know about the Ocean Forest Hotel, which you have a deep love, and it's probably as great a picture in that as anything, and so much more of your life. So
I would like to tell the Ocean Forest story. It's kind of a Greek tragedy, but it's a fascinating part of our beginning.
Yep. And I want to end today's episode with pick up this book. It's a fascinating read, and I hope I don't offend you, but it's written very raw and very truthful, and it's just an interesting read, and it's a great. So pick this book up and be looking out for Dino to come back, because he's got a lot more, trust me, a lot more history about Myrtle Beach that we want to share. And you know, our history is important, and Myrtle Beach has come a long way. We're thankful for our history. We need to remember our history, and it's important. So I thank you for having so much knowledge and sharing that with us.
No, it's my pleasure.
And it's been an honor to have you.
Oh, my honor.
And we're going to come back. Friends, join us next time.